much. I want to bring Anousheh into the conversation here, and let's play some video, if we could, please, of a pretty stunning moment. Jim was talking about the publicity of this and how much we're seeing, but do you see that that chain around, the gold necklace around the President Trump's neck there? Well, Saudi King Salman presented that to the president. It's a gold medal. The collar of Abdulaziz Al Saud is what it's called, and it's the nation's highest honor. I want to ask you, Anousheh, what do you make of, what is the symbolism there? What is the intention as he gives him that honor? Because already what we are seeing, the grandeur of this welcome, is so different from what we've seen with past presidents.
Well, I think that Donald Trump has always kind of taken a softer stance when it's come to Saudi Arabia. You know, they were left off of his famous Muslim ban list and also his executive order barring Muslim immigrants from the U.S. And, you know, despite Saudi Arabia being one of the greatest exporters of radical Islam, Donald Trump has always taken a softer stance on them. And let's not forget, there's a $109 billion arms deal also on the table that he has to seal with the Saudis. And, you know, it's really interesting because in many ways there couldn't be a better time for Donald Trump to kind of be out of Washington and escape the siege-like atmosphere he's facing here back at home and be in Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, this really ambitious trip is full of diplomatic landmines. And I really think his first diplomatic blunder has the potential to start off in Saudi, in Riyadh.
So, Anousheh, I want to ask you about that. Can President Trump speak with authority to these 50 Muslim leaders about the religion of Islam and the relations based in the wake of everything that he has said about Muslims as he was a candidate prior to the presidency?
You know, frankly, Christy, I think it's offensive for Donald Trump to be, you know, even attempting to be pontificating on Islam, especially in Saudi Arabia, which is the birthplace of Islam and the place of some of Islam's holiest sites. I think it's completely offensive, and he should take this opportunity not to preach and lecture to the Muslim world, but frankly apologize and listen and learn. I mean, let's not forget that this president ran his entire political campaign on anti-Muslim rhetoric, on anti-Muslim sentiment, and I really don't think he's the right messenger for a message, to bring a message of peace and unity to the Middle East.
Alex Pappas, let me bring you into this conversation. What do you think of that? Is he the right person, or do the Saudis really care so much about what was said during a campaign? Can they write it off and say, hey, he was saying that just to get elected?
Well, he's president of the United States, so obviously they care what he has to say about this. You know, we were talking earlier about whether he would use that phrase radical Islam in this sort of speech. A lot of people thinking perhaps maybe he will take a more kind of moderate tone because the president does, you know, play to his audience. Jim Acosta makes an interesting point that Stephen Miller is one of the guys who's one of his aides who's helping him write the speech. He's a former aide to Jeff Sessions. He's a true believer. You know, if he has a really strong hand in this speech, that would be an indication that Trump is not necessarily going to take the most moderate tones here and would still, you know, speak in sort of ways he did during the campaign.
So I want to take a look here at the placement, the seating arrangement, let's say, that Nick Robertson was talking about. We've got King Salman in the middle of this coffee ceremony, President Trump to his right, the First Lady, Melania Trump, to his left. Anousheh, as I understand it, you know, a lot of families do business together in Saudi Arabia. Is that a commonality that Saudi families see with President Trump when we see in the contingent that he has taken there, his daughter, Ivanka, is with him. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, also his senior advisor, is with him. Is there a commonality there that they share that Saudis are focusing on?
There is a commonality, but I really don't think that's one that you want to highlight. I mean, we're not talking about a great example of democracy when it comes to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Let's not forget that women are still fighting for the right to drive, still fighting for the right to vote in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, you'll notice that Ivanka Trump is not wearing a headscarf, which is, you know, something that a lot of foreign dignitaries and their spouses don't necessarily have to abide by. But in Saudi Arabia, women are legally required not only to have a male guardian, for simple things such as being allowed to travel, such as being allowed to seek medical attention, but they do also have to be covered from head to toe. So it's an interesting note that neither Melania or Ivanka have chosen not to wear the headscarf.